We are now joined by Florence Riako Anam, the Co-Executive Director for the Global Network of People Living with HIV. Florence, welcome to Morning Rush.
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
It's a pleasure having you. You're Kenyan, is that right?
Yes, I'm Kenyan.
Well, welcome
I am visiting
to
and feeling your heat.
It's hot. I told you it was hot, didn't I? Yeah, no one believes me. It is, you see. And Kenya's also quite hot. Anyway, welcome to Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much.
Now, before I get into some issues that I'd like to discuss with you, maybe just a brief overview of ICASA. Tell us what it is, how many people, tell us all about it, just very briefly.
So the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa, ICASA, has been running for, I think, a decade now. And it's every 2 years, scientists, communities, civil society, programmers that work on HIV come together to share knowledge, learn. There's always science that is shared in some of the sessions that go on, but also implementing science. If we're doing a piece of work, we do write abstracts and come and share what's working, what's not working. But it's also a moment for movement building, for the people living with HIV, for young people, for different people that are affected by HIV to come together, identify their issues, identify advocacy priorities. So it's a buzz of different pieces of activities that are around sharing, learning, and moving the work ahead.
That's excellent. Now, there has been a lot of work in the fight against HIV/AIDS, but there's been reports recently of new infections, particularly 15 to 19. But more worrying, I suppose, is the plus 50 generation. There seems to be new infections going in there. Why? I suppose. What is driving up these cases in those different demographics?
So I think two different sets of things. The 50-year-olds could have been missed somewhere, particularly the women. I think most of the women were found when they were pregnant and they had to come to the clinic for antenatal care, and we found women there. But if you have women who did not access antenatal care in that time, then probably they were missed. There are so many men who don't need to come to the health facility. They're healthy, they're fine. And people can live with HIV for years without knowing. So there's a whole component of the people that are 45, 50 that could have just been missed across the process of their life. But there's also people who could be getting new infections. And so maybe
exactly,
those are the
like
ones
becoming like, I don't know, sexually more, I don't know if the word is more sexually active over 50.
So the issue is we forget to address the issues that come with the sexual needs of older people. We assume they don't have sex, or we assume the sex that they have is... so they don't need to be talked to about health and about taking care of themselves.
Yeah, it's true.
And so they get missed, but they also have their unique needs, and sometimes just equal to that is the fact that half the time the people they engage with are younger people. So I heard you earlier speak to the statistics around adolescents. So it's usually that correlation between intergenerational relationships that then fuel the new infections.
Okay.
So if we reach particularly men, statistically we know that most of the HIV people who are not getting to undetectable levels, which when you get to you can't pass the virus, are men. And people who are getting newly infected all the time are young women between 15 and 24. So you see the correlation.
You can see the correlation, I was saying earlier in the first hour, that it appears as if people forgot, like, it's almost like we forgot about HIV because, it's what used to be, it's like COVID, it used to be there, and so we no longer worry about it. Is the message of HIV getting across to people? Because I know that during COVID, of course, advocacy work was highly affected in all areas. I mean, are we back to getting the message out that HIV is still around, you still got to protect yourself and be careful?
Can I take that in two parts?
Of course.
I think people didn't forget about HIV. People are fixated on the person living with AIDS.
Okay.
The thin person with wounds and funny looking and whatnot.
It's AIDS.
That's what people are fixated. And if they don't see that, then they don't see that they need to be worried about anything. People living with HIV look like me, right? And and we look like me because we are using treatment, we are healthy, and we are going on about our lives. So at some point, I think the messaging around taking care or using the different prevention interventions diminished or became reduced as funding was reduced, community interventions were fast hit. So people lost out on this message. But I think COVID was a good spot because COVID was a viral disease. People started to understand, oh, so there are diseases like COVID. Okay, there's diseases like that Ebola and all this. There was a lot of public conversation that I think HIV has now used in terms of people understanding you can't get tested, you need to, take care, wash your hands, wear a mask, protect yourself sexually in this and that way. So there's opportunities now. But I think we need to start to tell people the new message and not stick around with the old one.
Yeah, I think so. That's a very good point. Well, I like that very much. Now, stigma and discrimination, that used to be a huge problem. Have we managed to sort of get rid of that or at least reduce it substantially, particularly in Africa?
Stigma is persistent. I feel like as a person living with HIV myself, it's just evolved. It's not you don't want to share my cup or buy my soap if I have a shop. It's more subtle. It's exclusionary. It's deciding. It's institutionalized even. It's faced in health facilities. It's faced for compounded reason. If someone is poor and then they're living with HIV, so you see, if someone is maybe from a key populations, but then they're living with HIV. So all of these things are different for different settings. The primary root cause of stigma is fear. So as long as people fear or don't understand the truth about how HIV is transmitted, we cannot get away from stigma. So the other thing, GNP Plus will be launching on the 5th, our stigma index report, a global one for 25 countries. Okay. One of the things we are finding out of all of this is externalized stigma may have to some degree morphed and changed differently. The biggest stigma we are facing now is internalized. People living with HIV feeling shame, themselves feeling they don't need to apply for a job or do something because they were made to think or the environment made them feel like a disease too much. So there's also aspect of mental health needs that now people living with HIV have as a result of the stigma.
Now, there has been obviously the advent of PrEP and PEP.
Yeah.
How have these contributed in the fight? I mean, because at the same time, we also hear reckless behavior because people think, oh, we can just take these, this PrEP and PEP and we'll be fine tomorrow morning. How have they contributed in the fight against HIV/AIDS, or have they?
So I didn't live in the 80s, I was a kid, but I read about the stories of the 80s, and people in the 80s were pretty wild, right? That's what we call it.
Yes, wild. They were.
There was freedom and there was expression.
Yeah, it was freedom.
Yeah, but it's what we now call reckless behavior. Yeah, I don't think the issue here is the behavior, and I feel like the progress in science is the biggest win in the HIV movement for the last 10 years. Okay. We have found that medicine, if used well, can prevent HIV from spreading. If you take PrEP, you cannot get the virus. If a person living with HIV takes their treatment well and are undetectable, they cannot pass the virus to a sexual partner. All these things are wins. PrEP has always existed, I think, from the 90s as a way of preventing as well infections. But PrEP is spread across because most people really cannot control the environments from which the risk of HIV can happen. Women, for example, cannot control how situations in their married life happens if there's dual partners in that scenario. And so maybe PrEP during pregnancy can help to prevent getting the virus and passing it to a child. So there's good things. If we stop to identify things as problems sometimes. So I don't look at it as reckless behavior. I just look at people will live their lives but with information and tools to make healthier choices.
All right. So what is your final message? I mean, you're the co-executive director, Global Network for People Living with HIV. Do you have a final message to people living with HIV here in Zimbabwe?
I have a message to people living with HIV. I think my message would be, we have the opportunity now to live our lives to the best of our ability. Some people like us can show that that is possible. You just need to get tested, know your HIV status, get treatment. It's just one pill a day. Use it well, get undetectable, and you can live healthy quality life. You do not have to be sick. You do not have to die. There is a whole lot of heat and a lot of good things happening in the world that you need to be here for.
I'm going to ask you to give me another message to adolescents and older people. Go on, talk to them also.
Young people, there is so much to do. I think for young people, what I would say, I would talk to the parents of the young people, first of all. Mm-hmm. Know your child and support your child. I think to put the responsibility, and I'm speaking to you as a person who had a child at 18, right? I don't think I would have known what to do at that time. They are still children, and I would just like to ask parents to really have the conversations with their children that would enable them get to make informed decisions about their sexual health. We cannot lie, we cannot run away. They're accessing more information. You just need to decide whether your child will be taught by the world or by you. To the young people, I don't know if I can say this on this channel, but sex is a beautiful thing. But like any beautiful thing, it comes with its repercussions. And some are good, some are bad. And you can wait for when it's the right time, when you're capable of dealing with everything that comes from it, but also there are ways to protect yourselves from the harsh repercussions of that decision.
Florence Riako Anam, the Co-Executive Director for the Global Network for People Living with HIV. Ma'am, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Andy, for having me.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. ICASA is roaring into life today. I believe it's on until Friday. And of course, the world spotlight is on HIV and STIs, and everything is happening right here in Zimbabwe. Well, that's it for our news segment. Don't go away. I'll be back with Morning Rush Markets and Sport. Morning Rush.